Hello everyone, and welcome to the DxD Tales. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Issei was born from the abyssal egg of Azathoth, the dragon of nothingness. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Void Awakens. The pencil disappeared between Issei Hyodo's fingers. Not dropped, not misplaced. It simply ceased to exist mid-equation, leaving a faint wisp of darkness that dissipated like smoke against his skin. The third one this week. Issei stared at the empty space between his thumb and forefinger, his breath catching as a familiar cold sensation spread through his palm. Mathematics homework lay half-finished before him, the harsh fluorescent lights of Kuo Academy's library suddenly seeming dimmer, as if reluctant to fully illuminate the space around him. "Did you see that?" he whispered to himself, flexing his fingers experimentally. Nobody answered. Nobody ever did. The strange occurrences had started 3 months ago on his 17th birthday, small objects vanishing, fleeting glimpses of impossible geometries in reflective surfaces, and the dreams, those cosmic nightmares of endless dark and watching eyes that left him gasping awake with fragments of knowledge he couldn't possibly possess. A library assistant walked past, her footsteps faltering as she neared his table. She adjusted her path without seeming to notice, giving his corner a wide berth. People had been doing that lately, unconsciously avoiding him as if his personal space had become subtly repellent to them. Issei gathered his books with deliberate calm, ignoring the tremor in his fingers. The last bell had rung 30 minutes ago. Most students had already left for club activities or headed home. As he stood, a strange sensation of weightlessness washed over him. For 3 heartbeats, he could have sworn his feet weren't touching the floor. "You're losing it, Hyodo," he muttered, shouldering his bag and heading for the exit. Outside, afternoon sunlight spilled across the manicured grounds of Kuo Academy. The former all-girls school had only recently become co-ed, its Gothic architecture and sprawling campus still dominated by female students. Issei kept his head down as he walked, hyper-aware of the way shadows seemed to deepen as he passed. "Yo, Issei." The voice cut through his thoughts. Matsuda and Motohama, his friends since middle school, were lounging against the stone wall separating the old school building from the main path. "We're heading to the arcade," Matsuda said, pushing his glasses up with one finger. "You coming?" "Sorry, not today." Issei forced a smile. "Got something to take care of." Motohama raised an eyebrow. "You've been ditching us a lot lately. Found yourself a girlfriend?" "As if," Matsuda snorted. "Our boy here would tell us immediately if he managed that miracle." Their laughter felt distant, separated from Issei by more than just the few feet between them. He'd been pulling away from them gradually, not intentionally, but their obsession with IRLs and pornography had started to seem childish compared to the cosmic concepts that haunted his dreams. "Maybe next time," Issei said, already turning away. "I've just been tired." That wasn't entirely a lie. The dreams left him exhausted, drained in a way that sleep couldn't remedy. Dreams of floating through infinite darkness, of voices speaking in languages that shouldn't make sense but somehow did. Of power that could unmake stars with a thought. He felt Motohama's concerned gaze on his back as he walked away but didn't turn around. What could he possibly say? "Sorry guys, I think I am going insane or maybe turning into something not human." The thought almost made him laugh. The route home took him through the Central Park, deserted at this hour except for a businessman hurrying along the opposite path. Issei paused at the fountain, watching water cascade over weathered stone. His reflection rippled across the surface, and then shifted, showing not his face but a vast, writhing darkness filled with countless luminous eyes. Issei jerked back, heart hammering against his ribs. The reflection returned to normal instantly, but the memory of what he'd seen lingered. Not a hallucination. Not anymore. These incidents were increasing in frequency and intensity. "You feel it too, don't you?" a soft voice asked from behind him. The changing. Issei whirled, instinctively dropping into a defensive stance he didn't remember learning. 10 feet away stood a man in his late 30s, dressed in an expensive charcoal suit that seemed at odds with his casual demeanor. Golden bangs framed a face that might have appeared youthful if not for eyes that held centuries of knowledge. "Who are you?" Issei demanded, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. The man smiled, and spread open at his sides in a gesture of peace. My name is Azazel, and you, Issei Hyodo, are becoming something quite fascinating. A cold prickle ran down Issei's spine. How do you know my name? I make it my business to know when something extraordinary appears in my territory. Azazel took a step closer, his movement too fluid to be entirely human. Especially when that something is causing dimensional fractures simply by existing. Issei felt a surge of something dark and electric beneath his skin, a power responding to perceived threat. I don't know what you're talking about. The disappearing objects, the way people unconsciously avoid you, the dreams of cosmic darkness speaking directly into your mind. Azazel's smile widened at Issei's shocked expression. Yes, I thought so. A gust of wind scattered autumn leaves between them, and in that moment, Issei glimpsed something impossible, massive shadowy wings extending from Azazel's back, there and gone in an eye blink. What are you? Issei whispered. A better question might be, what are you becoming, Issei Hyodo? Azazel countered. Because whatever it is, it's drawing attention. Not all of it friendly. As if summoned by his words, the air 20 feet to their right rippled like heat off asphalt. A vertical line appeared in empty space, widening into a tear through which spilled sickly green light. Figures emerged, humanoid but wrong in subtle ways. Two long limbs, joints that bent backward, eyes that reflected light like polished metal. Speaking of unfriendly attention, Azazel sighed, his casual demeanor evaporating as 12 jet black wings unfurled from his back. Behind me, Issei. Now, Issei remained rooted to the spot, transfixed by the approaching entities. They moved with jerky, insectal precision, their bodies seeming to phase slightly in and out of reality with each step. The tallest one fixed its metallic gaze directly on him. The seed awakens, it hissed in a voice like grinding glass. Give it to us, fallen one, and we will leave your territory intact. Azazel manifested a spear of golden light in his right hand. You have no authority here, outsider. Return your dimension before I send you back in pieces. The three creatures spread out in a flanking maneuver, too coordinated to be anything but practiced hunters. The smallest one tilted its head at an impossible angle, studying Issei with unsettling intensity. It does not know, it chittered. The seed is unaware, unformed, vulnerable. Fear paralyzed Issei as the creatures tensed to spring, but something else rose alongside the fear. A pressure building behind his eyes and beneath his skin. Knowledge bloomed in his mind from nowhere. These were void stalkers, dimensional predators that hunted nascent power across realities. And they had come for him. The first stalker lunged forward with inhuman speed, darting past Azazel's defensive perimeter. Issei raised his hands instinctively, and the world around him seemed to slow. Colors inverting as perception expanded beyond normal limits. He felt the atoms between him and the creature, felt the empty space that comprised most of reality. And then he simply removed that space. The void stalker collided with a wall of absolute nothingness that had not existed a second before. It screeched, its form distorting as edges of its body seemed to disintegrate where they touched the barrier. Issei stared in shock at the swirling darkness emanating from his outstretched hands, not a magical construct or energy field, but the absence of everything. A perfect slice of non-existence. Fascinating, Azazel murmured, golden spear still held ready. Not sacred gear activation at all. The remaining stalkers hesitated, their metallic eyes flickering between Issei and their wounded companion. The injured one pulled back, its left arm terminating now in a perfectly smooth stump where it had touched Issei's barrier. The seed is awakening, the tallest one snarled. We must take it now, before. It never finished the sentence. A blur of black and violet streaked from the trees, resolving into a woman with feline grace and calculating golden eyes. She moved like liquid shadow, her hands wreathed in pulsing dark energy as she drove clawed fingers directly through the stalker's chest. Sorry to crash your party, she purred, rich with amusement as she extracted a glowing crystal from the creature's body. It collapsed into ash around her fingers. But I've been waiting weeks for these vermin to show themselves. Azazel's expression hardened. Kuroka, I might have known you'd be lurking nearby. Don't sound so disappointed, Governor. The woman, Kuroka, flicked her wrist, shattering the crystal. Her tight black clothing accentuated every movement. Twin black tails swishing behind her with predatory satisfaction. "I just saved you some trouble." The remaining stalker hissed in fury, lunging toward Kuroka with blinding speed. She sidestepped with supernatural grace, but the creature pivoted mid-lunge, directly into Issei's path. Time slowed again. The pressure behind Issei's eyes built to excruciating levels as instinct took over. He didn't raise a barrier this time. Instead, he reached out with his mind and gripped the very fabric of space around the stalker. With a gesture that felt as natural as breathing, he compressed that space to a single point. The stalker imploded with a sound like thunder, collapsing into a sphere of absolute darkness that winked out of existence a moment later. The afterim, age burned in Issei's vision as he staggered backward, suddenly lightheaded. The world tilted alarmingly, ground rushing up to meet him. Strong hands caught him before he fell. "Easy," Azazel murmured. That was quite a display for a first manifestation. Issei struggled to focus, his consciousness threatening to slip away. Through blurred vision, he saw Kuroka examining the spot where the stalker had vanished. Her expression a mixture of surprise and calculation. "What's happening to me?" Issei managed, each word requiring immense effort. Azazel and Kuroka exchanged a glance laden with unspoken meaning. "Something impossible," Azazel replied quietly. "You're not a devil, angel, or fallen. You're not a dragon host or a descendant of heroes. You're something else entirely." Kuroka approached, her golden eyes studying Issei with newfound interest. The Void Stalkers called him the Seed. What did they mean by that? "Not here," Azazel said, looking around at the deserted park. "We've already attracted too much attention. Dimensional rifts leave traces that others can follow." Issei's vision darkened at the edges as exhaustion claimed him. The last thing he saw before Khan's seriousness fled was Kuroka's curious expression as she leaned closer, her voice a distant whisper. "The abyssal egg stirs. How fascinating. Dreams unfolded in fractal patterns, each segment containing infinities within. Issei floated in darkness beyond comprehension, a void so absolute it transcended the concept of emptiness. Yet he wasn't alone. "Awaken, son of my essence." The voice wasn't a voice at all, but rather concepts impressed directly into his consciousness. Each word contained multitudes, libraries of meaning compressed into thought packets that expanded upon reception. "Who are you?" Issei asked, his own voice sounding foreign in this place without dimensions. "I am the beginning and the conclusion. The blind idiot god, the dragon of nothingness, the cosmic destroyer." Images cascaded through Issei's mind. A vast draconic entity that simultaneously existed and didn't exist, a being of such cosmic scale that entire universes formed and collapsed in the spaces between its thoughts. Azathoth, a name older than time, whispered in terror across 1,000 realities. "You are my seed, cast into this realm when the boundaries grew thin. My essence reborn." "No," Issei recoiled from the knowledge being pressed into him. "I'm human. I was born to human parents. I have a normal life." A sensation like laughter rippled through the void, though nothing so simple as humor motivated it. "Your vessel was born of humans. The essence within you is mine." The egg cracks, Issei Hyodo. The void awakens. The darkness pulsed, and suddenly Issei was falling through layers of reality, glimpsing worlds and dimensions beyond comprehension. In one, dragons of impossible size battled across galaxies. In another, figures of light and darkness waged eternal war. In a third, a Rimson-haired girl looked up from a chess game, her eyes widening as if she sensed his passage. "They will come for you. They will fear you. They will worship you." Issei tried to protest, but the void was already receding, reality reasserting itself in painful increments. Sure, it's safe to let the Nekosho stay. She's wanted by the devils, you know. Kuroka goes where she pleases. Better to have her curiosity working with us than against us. Besides, she knows more about spiritual energy than most. The voices penetrated Issei's consciousness slowly, drawing him back to wakefulness. He lay on something soft. A couch perhaps, in a room that smelled of old books and expensive whiskey. His body felt leaden, drained in a way that transcended physical exhaustion. With tremendous effort, he opened his eyes. A modern apartment stretched before him, its open floor plan dominated by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city at night. Azazel stood by a well-stocked bar, pouring amber liquid into crystal glasses. Kuroka lounged in an armchair opposite, her black tail swishing lazily as she examined her claws. "The sleeping beauty awakens," she purred, golden eyes fixing on Issei with predatory interest. And just when the conversation was getting interesting, Azazel approached, offering Issei a glass of water instead of alcohol. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been run over by a truck," Issei croaked, struggling to a sitting position. "How long was I out?" 6 hours, Azazel replied, settling into an armchair. "Long enough for me to move you somewhere safe and are your unexpected feline defender to invite herself along." Kuroka stretched with deliberate sensuousness. "I've been tracking those void stalkers for weeks. They kept circling this city, hunting something. Imagine my surprise when I discovered their prey was a human boy." Her smile revealed slightly pointed canines. "Or something wearing human skin, at least." Memories of the park incident rushed back, the strange creatures. The barrier of darkness he'd created, the way he'd compressed one attacker into nothingness. None of it should have been possible. "What am I?" Issei asked, voice steadier than he felt. Azazel's expression grew serious. "That's the billion-dollar question. At first, I thought you might be a sacred gear user awakening to their power. But what you displayed wasn't divine energy or demonic power." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "It was something else. Something primordial. The void stalkers called you the seed," Kuroka added, her playfulness giving way to genuine curiosity. "And in your sleep, you were muttering about an abyssal egg." Cold dread settled in Issei's stomach as fragments of his dream returned. "Azathoth," he whispered, "the dragon of nothingness." Azazel's glass froze halfway to his lips. "What did you say?" "In my dream." Issei hesitated, struggling to translate the vast concepts into limited human language. A voice told him, "I was born from the abyssal egg of Azathoth. That I contained its essence." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Kuroka's tails went completely still, her golden eyes widening. "Azathoth," Azazel repeated carefully, setting down his glass. "Are you certain that was the name?" Issei nodded. "It called itself the blind idiot god, and the cosmic destroyer, too." Azazel and Kuroka exchanged another loaded glance. "I thought it was just a myth," Kuroka said quietly. "A boogeyman story to frighten young yokai." "All myths have roots in truth," Azazel replied. "Especially the frightening ones." He turned back to Issei. "What you're describing exists in the oldest texts of every supernatural faction, a primordial entity that predates even Great Red and Ophis, existing in the void before creation itself. According to yokai legends," Kuroka added, "Azathoth sleeps eternally beyond the boundaries of reality. If it ever fully awakened, all existence would be unmade." The implications struck Issei like a physical blow. "Are you saying I'm part of this thing? That I'm going to destroy the world?" "Not necessarily," Azazel said quickly. "Mythology is rarely literal. What matters is that your power is manifesting, and it's attracting attention across dimensions. Those creatures in the park won't be the last to come looking," Kuroka warned, examining her claws again. "Word spreads quickly in the supernatural world." Issei looked down at his hands, ordinary human hands that had somehow manipulated the fabric of reality itself. "My parents, are they in danger?" "Possibly," Azazel acknowledged, "but I've taken precautions. There are wards around your family home now, and I've arranged for surveillance." "They're not my real parents, are they?" The question emerged unbidden, painful in its implications. Azazel's expression softened. "I can't answer that yet. But DNA doesn't define family, Issei. Whatever your origin, the people who raised you clearly love you." The thought provided little comfort. Issei's entire identity felt suddenly precarious, as if he might dissolve into the darkness he'd manipulated. "So what happens now?" he asked finally. "Now," Azazel said, rising to his feet, "we begin your training. If you truly carry the essence of Azathoth, you need to learn control before your power attracts something worse than void stalkers." Kuroka uncurled from her chair with feline grace. "I'll help," she announced, ignoring Azazel's raised eyebrow. "Nekosho are experts in spiritual energy. If the boy's power has aspects of senjutsu or yujutsu, I can teach him better than any fallen angel. And your motives are purely altruistic, I'm sure," Azazel said dryly. Kuroka smiled, sidling closer to Issei. Let's just say I find power fascinating. Her golden eyes gleamed with interest that wasn't entirely predatory. Besides, I've been bored lately. This promises to be entertaining at minimum. Issei found himself simultaneously wary of and drawn to the Neko show. There was danger in her casual movements and calculated smiles, but also an honesty that Azathoth's careful diplomacy lacked. She wanted something from him. That much was obvious, but she didn't pretend otherwise. I should call my parents, Issei said, searching his pockets for his phone. They'll be worried. Already taken care of, Azathoth replied. As far as they know. You're at a special academic retreat for promising students. The school records have been adjusted accordingly. The casual manipulation of his life should have angered Issei. But exhaustion dampened the emotion to a dull resentment. You had no right. No, I didn't, Azathoth agreed, surprising him. But necessary actions rarely align with rights. The power awakening in you could tear holes in reality if mishandled. Would you prefer I left you unprepared while entities like those stalkers hunt you down? Put that way, Issei had little argument. How long will this training take? That depends entirely on you, Azathoth said. Most sacred gear users take months to master the basics. But you're not most users, are you? Kuroka circled behind Issei, her presence raising goosebumps along his neck. I'm curious to see what you're capable of, Void Boy. Those stalkers practically disintegrated when they touched your power. I don't even know what I did, Issei admitted. It just happened. Instinct. Azathoth nodded. Raw power responding to perceived threat. Our job is to transform that instinct into controlled ability. Issei stood, testing his strength. His legs felt steadier now. The bone-deep exhaustion receding. When do we start? We already have, Azathoth replied with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Lesson 1. The supernatural world doesn't wait for convenient timing. As if summoned by his words, the massive windows overlooking the city darkened, not with night but with an unnatural shadow that spread like ink through water. Darkness coalesced into a shape, a massive eye that blinked once, focusing directly on Issei. Kuroka hissed, dropping into a defensive crouch. That's no void stalker. No, Azathoth agreed grimly. Black wings unfurling from his back as he manifested 2 spears of light. That's an abyssal observer. Seems news of our young friend has reached the deeper realms. The eye pulsed, and suddenly the windows shattered inward. Razor-sharp glass suspended in midair for an impossible moment before reversing direction, flying back toward the encroaching darkness. The shards passed through the eye without effect, disappearing into the void beyond. Child of the egg, a voice resonated directly in Issei's mind. Your awakening disturbs the deep currents. Unlike the dream voice of Azathoth, this consciousness felt alien, almost clinical in its assessment. Issei felt himself being examined on levels beyond physical, his very essence catalogued and measured by the entity. What do you want? He demanded, surprised again by his own steadiness. Verification, classification, determination of threat level. Well, that's not ominous at all, Kuroka muttered, dark energy swirling around her hands. The eye pulsed again, and suddenly Issei's perception expanded. He could see the flows of power through the room. Azathoth's light spears comprised of divine energy corrupted by shadow, Kuroka's senjutsu. A mixture of natural energy and spiritual power tinged with darkness. Most disturbing, he could see something inside himself, a swirling vortex of absolute void where his spiritual core should be. The abyssal egg fragments within you. The observer communicated. Azathoth stirs in its slumber. This requires adjustment. Tendrils of darkness extended from the eye, reaching for Issei with inexorable purpose. Azathoth launched forward, light spears cutting through the approaching shadows, but more simply formed in their place. Kuroka unleashed a barrage of energy bolts that dissipated harmlessly against the encroaching void. Panic surged through Issei, but beneath it, something else stirred. Not fear, but indignation. An absolute certainty that this entity had no right to adjust anything about him. Enough, he shouted, the single word carrying weight beyond its meaning. The pressure behind his eyes returned tenfold as power surged through him. This time, Issei didn't fight it. He embraced the void within, letting it flow through his consciousness. The apartment fell away from his perception, revealing the true nature of the observer, a multidimensional entity extending beyond the eye-shaped projection. Its vast form barely contained by the barriers between worlds. Issei reached out not with his hands but with his mind, gripping the dimensional tethers that allowed the observer to manifest. With a thought that felt like tearing paper, he severed those connections one by one. The eye convulsed, its form distorting as it was forcibly disconnected from its greater self. Impossible, it projected, the mental voice losing coherence. The egg cannot possess awareness yet. The cycle is incomplete. I am not an egg, Issei stated, each word resonating with power that felt simultaneously foreign and intrinsically his. I am Issei Hyodo, and you are not welcome here. With a final surge of will, he compressed the remaining manifestation as he had the Void Stalker call APSING it into a pinpoint of darkness that winked out of existence. The backlash slammed into him like a physical blow, driving him to his knees as reality reasserted itself around him. The apartment was in ruins. Furniture overturned, windows shattered, walls scorched by errant energy. Azazel stood motionless, his expression a mixture of awe and concern. Kuroka had dropped all pretense of casual interest, her golden eyes wide with something approaching reverence. Holy shit, she whispered, an uncharacteristic break in her composure. Azazel lowered his light spear slowly. I've lived for millennia, he said quietly. I've witnessed the biblical God's power, seen ultimate-class devils unleash their full potential, and observed heavenly dragons at the height of their conflict. He looked directly at Issei, who still knelt amidst the destruction. What you just did should not have been possible for anyone, let alone a 17-year-old boy with no training. Issei stared at his hands, which trembled not with exhaustion but with excess energy. The void within him had not diminished after the display. If anything, it felt more accessible, as if a dam had been breached. What did I do? He asked. You forcibly ejected an abyssal observer from our dimension, Kuroka replied, circling him with new respect in her gaze. Entities like that are immune to conventional attacks. Even gods think twice before confronting them directly. The implications are significant, Azazel added, dismissing his light weapons with a thought. If you can affect beings from the dimensional gap and beyond, you represent a variable that no faction has accounted for. Issei struggled to his feet, refusing Kuroka's offered hand. I'm still me, he insisted, though the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. This power doesn't change who I am. Doesn't it? Kuroka challenged, her golden eyes searching his face. The Issei Hyodo who went to school this morning couldn't banish extra-dimensional entities with a thought. Where did that ability come from, if not from something fundamental changing within you? The question struck too close to Issei's own fears to ignore. What was happening to him? Was he still human at all? Or was he simply a vessel for something ancient and terrible, a ticking time bomb of cosmic destruction? Azazel sighed, surveying the ruined apartment. We need to move. That display will have been noticed by every supernatural faction within 100 miles. Where can we go that's safe from things like that? Issei asked, gesturing to where the observer had been. Nowhere is truly safe, Azazel replied grimly, but I maintain several pocket dimensions for emergencies. We'll use one of those while we figure out our next steps. Kuroka prowled the perimeter of the room. Her senses clearly extended beyond normal perception. We should hurry, she urged. I sense multiple approaches. Devils from the west, something else from the east. Azazel nodded, producing an ornate silver key from his pocket. This will take us to a secure location. Both of you, stay close. He inserted the key into empty air, turning it as if unlocking an invisible door. Reality split along invisible seams, revealing a glowing portal. Issei hesitated, looking back at the shattered windows. Beyond them, the city continued its normal nighttime rhythm, unaware of the cosmic drama unfolding in its midst. Somewhere out there were his parents, ordinary people who had raised a boy who turned out to be anything but ordinary. Would he ever see them again? Would they even recognize what he was becoming? Issei, Azazel called, his voice gentler than before. I know this is overwhelming. But right now, we need to move. With a final glance at the human world, Issei stepped through the portal into uncertainty. The pocket dimension defied conventional physics. Its sky held 3 moons of different colors, casting multicolored shadows across a landscape. It seemed to shift subtly when viewed from different angles. A Japanese-style mansion stood atop a hill that might not have been a hill at all but rather a fold in space itself. "Welcome to my personal retreat," Azazel said, leading them toward the building. "Time flows differently here, roughly 10 hours inside for everyone outside. We can use that to our advantage for training." Issei absorbed the impossibilities around him with surprising calm. After the day's events, a sky with 3 moons hardly registered as unusual. "Who else knows about this place?" Kuroka asked, her tail swishing with obvious agitation. "Only my most trusted associates," Azazel replied. "And none of them would betray its location, even under duress." The mansion's interior proved less extravagant than its exterior suggested. Functional rooms equipped with modern amenities despite the traditional architecture. Azazel led them to a spacious living area where cushions surrounded a low table. "Sit," he instructed. "We need to discuss what happened and what it means." Issei sank onto a cushion, suddenly aware of how long it had been since he'd eaten. As if reading his mind, Kuroka produced a fruit from somewhere and tossed it to him. It resembled an apple but shimmered with an iridescent skin. "Dimensional fruit," she explained at his hesitation. "Perfectly safe, and it'll help restore your energy faster than normal food." "Thanks." Issei bit into it cautiously. Flavors exploded across his tongue. Sweet and tart and spicy all at once, like tasting a rainbow. Energy surged through him immediately, the lingering exhaustion evaporating. Azazel settled across from them, his expression serious. "Let me be direct. What's happening to you is unprecedented in recorded history. The power you display, against the observer, suggests you're not merely connected to Azathoth, you may be a direct manifestation of its essence." "Like a reincarnation?" Issei asked between bites of the strange fruit. "Not exactly." Azazel steepled his fingers. "Reincarnation implies a soul transferring between vessels. This is more like budding. A fragment of Azathoth's essence coalescing into human form." Kuroka stretched out languidly beside Issei, close enough that he could feel her body heat. In yokai traditions, Azathoth is described as the dragon of nothingness, a being so vast and primordial that universes exist merely as dreams in its sleeping mind. "If that's true," Issei said slowly, "then what does it mean for me to carry its essence? Am I going to, I don't know, unmake reality or something?" "That depends entirely on you," Azazel replied. "Power itself is neutral. The Abyssal observer called you, child of the egg. In draconic mythology, eggs represent potential, power not yet fully formed or directed. So I'm not Azathoth itself, but a baby version." The concept was simultaneously comforting and horrifying. Kuroka laughed, the sound surprisingly musical. "A cosmic dragon hatchling in human form. How adorable." Azazel shot her a warning glance before continuing. "What matters is that your power is awakening rapidly, and it's drawing attention from beings that normally wouldn't notice our dimension. We need to help you gain control before someone decides you're too dangerous to exist." The implication hung heavy in the air. Issei set aside the half-eaten fruit, his appetite suddenly diminished. "How many things like that observer are out there?" he asked. "Countless," Azazel admitted. "The cosmos is vast, and much of it exists beyond the understanding of even the oldest supernatural beings. What we classify as gods are often just powerful entities within our limited dimensional understanding. And they'll all want to either control or destroy me," Issei concluded grimly. "Not necessarily," Kuroka interjected, her playfulness giving way to something more thoughtful. "Power attracts different responses. Some will fear you, yes. Others will desire your power for themselves. But some might see you as an opportunity, a new piece on the cosmic chessboard that changes the game entirely." Azazel nodded. Kuroka's right, surprisingly. The supernatural world is complex, with countless factions pursuing their own agendas. The devils, angels, fallen angels, various pantheons, dragon factions, all will have different reactions to your emergence. "Great," Issei muttered. "I've gone from being a regular high school student to the center of a supernatural political crisis." "Look on the bright side," Kuroka purred, leaning closer with a smile that revealed her pointed canines. "You'll never be bored again." Despite everything, Issei found himself returning her smile. There was something refreshing about her lack of pretense compared to Azazel's careful diplomacy. So what now? He asked, looking between them. How do I learn to control this void power? We start with basics, Azazel replied, rising to his feet. Meditation, energy manipulation, dimensional theory. The technical aspects aren't so different from other supernatural abilities, even if the source is unique. Kuroka rolled her eyes. Boring. The boy collapsed, an abyssal observer through sheer instinct. He doesn't need months of meditation, he needs practical experience. Experience without foundation leads to disaster, Azazel countered. Especially with power of this magnitude. Then we compromise, Issei suggested, surprising both of them. Theory and meditation with you, he nodded to Azazel, practical application with Kuroka. I need both if I'm going to understand what I'm becoming. Quote, the fallen angel and Nekosho exchanged evaluating glances. That could work, Azazel acknowledged grudgingly. Though I question the wisdom of letting a notorious criminal teach you anything. Quote, Kuroka's tails bristled. This notorious criminal saved your precious protege from void stalkers while you were playing with light spears. Stop, Issei said, his voice carrying unexpected authority. Both supernatural beings turned to him in surprise. I need both of your help, which means you need to at least tolerate each other. The command in his tone wasn't conscious, but something in it made both Azazel and Kuroka straighten slightly. For a heartbeat, Issei thought he saw unease flicker across Azazel's features, a reminder that whatever was awakening within him commanded respect even from beings who had lived for millennia. Well then, Kuroka recovered first, her smile returning with calculated charm. It seems our little dragon has teeth after all. Azazel nodded slowly. Indeed. Very well, Issei. We'll proceed with your suggested approach. He gestured toward a sliding door. There's a training area beyond those gardens. We'll begin at dawn. Issei looked out the window, where the three moons still hung in impossible configuration. How will we know when it's dawn? Azazel's smile held genuine amusement. The sky turns green. This dimension has its own rules. The casual mention of altered physical laws reminded Issei just how far he'd traveled from normal life in a single day. It seemed impossible that just this morning, his biggest concern had been mathematics homework. I should rest then, he said, suddenly aware of a deeper fatigue beneath the energy the fruit had provided. Not physical exhaustion, but mental. The strain of adjusting to a reality fundamentally different from everything he'd known. Azazel nodded. Kuroka will show you to a room. I need to make arrangements. Your emergence won't go unnoticed for long. As the fallen angel departed, Kuroka rose with feline grace, gesturing for Issei to follow. She led him through winding corridors that seemed to obey a spatial logic all their own, finally stopping before a simple sliding door. Your quarters, she announced. Though I wouldn't get too comfortable. Once word spreads about what you did to that observer, we won't be safe here for long. Issei paused with his hand on the door. Why are you helping me? Really? Kuroka studied him, her golden eyes unreadable in the dim light. Let's just say I recognize the value of unique power. The supernatural world runs on strength. Issei Hyodo. Those who have it make the rules. Her tails swished thoughtfully. Besides, I've been hunted most of my life. I know what it's like when everyone wants to either control you or kill you. The admission held unexpected vulnerability, at odds with her carefully crafted persona. For a moment, Issei glimpsed the person beneath the seductive playf. Ulnus, someone who had survived by her wits in a world determined to destroy her. Thank you, he said simply. Kuroka seemed briefly taken aback by his sincerity. Then her familiar smirk returned as she leaned forward, deliberately invading his personal space. Don't thank me yet, Void Boy. My training methods are intense. With that promise, or warning, she sauntered away, leaving Issei to wonder exactly what he'd gotten himself into. The room beyond the door was simple but comfortable. A futon, a small desk, and a window overlooking gardens that shimmered slightly at the edges, as if reality itself was less certain here. Issei sank onto the futon, mind racing despite his exhaustion. In a single day, everything had changed. His identity, his understanding of reality, his place in the world, all transformed by powers he barely comprehended. Part of him wanted to panic, to rail against the cosmic unfairness of having normalcy ripped away without warning or consent. But beneath that understandable reaction, something else stirred. A strange exhilaration, a sense that he was finally awakening to his true nature after 17 years of dormancy. The void power that had manifested felt simultaneously alien and intimately familiar, like remembering something long forgotten rather than discovering something new. Issei looked down at his hands, ordinary human hands that had manipulated the fabric of reality itself. Whatever he was becoming, whatever challenges lay ahead, one thing was certain: Issei Hyodo as he had known himself was gone. In his place was something new, something unprecedented. The child of the Abyssal egg, the seed of Azathoth, the dragon of nothingness reborn. As sleep claimed him, Issei wondered which would prove more dangerous, the cosmic entities hunting him from beyond dimensions, or the limitless void awakening within. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Dimensional Fractures. Nothingness stretched in all directions, a perfect void unmarred by matter or energy. Issei floated within it, simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. Here, in this placeless place, the boundaries between self and surroundings blurred until consciousness existed as pure potential rather than defined identity. Progress, whispered the voice that wasn't a voice. You begin to understand. Issei no longer feared these dream conversations with the entity identifying itself as Azathoth. Fear required separation, a self distinct from the feared object. Within the void, such distinctions dissolved like salt in water. I understand nothing, Issei responded, thoughts crystallizing into language through sheer will. I only experience. Excellent. Comprehension precedes control. Patterns emerged in the darkness, fractal geometries of perfect complexity, mathematical expressi. On so pure they transcended symbolic representation. Issei recognized them instinctively as the underlying framework of reality itself, the cosmic grammar through which existence was written. Why me? He asked, the question fundamental yet somehow childish within this context. Why now? Convergence, necessity, probability collapsing toward inevitability. The non-answers frustrated him. Speak clearly or not at all, Issei demanded. Authority resonating through the void. Amusement rippled through the darkness, not mockery but genuine appreciation. You grow stronger. Good. The patterns shifted, coalescent darkness forming a vast draconic silhouette of impossible dimensions. Not physically present, but rather the shadow of something so immense that reality itself could contain only its faintest outline. The dimensional boundaries thin. The great convergence approaches. A nexus is required, neither creator nor destroyer but mediator. Balance incarnate. And that's me, a cosmic mediator. Potential only. Choice remains. The void rippled as external forces tugged at Issei's consciousness. The dream space began dissolving around him, reality reasserting its claim. They come. The first fractures appear. Remember, you are not the void. You are its master. The darkness receded, replaced by insistent shaking and a familiar voice. Wake up, void boy. Training waits for no one, not even baby cosmic dragons. Issei opened his eyes to find Kuroka leaning over him, her golden eyes mere inches from his face. Her long black hair cascaded around them like a curtain, carrying the faint scent of forest herbs and something wilder beneath, a predator's musk, subtle but unmistakable. Personal space, he murmured, sitting up as she retreated with cat-like grace. Ever heard of it? Overrated concept, Kuroka purred, her twin tails swishing behind her with obvious amusement. Besides, you've been sleeping for 14 hours. Azathoth's getting impatient. Issei blinked, memories of the previous day rushing back. The void stalkers, the abyssal observer, the revelation of his inhuman nature. None of it had been a nightmare. This Japanese-style room with its subtly wrong proportions existed in a pocket dimension, and he was apparently the reincarnation of a cosmic dragon god. Just another Tuesday. 14 hours. He stretched, surprised to find his body energized rather than stiff. Doesn't feel like it. Time works differently here, Kuroka reminded him, tossing a bundle of cloth onto the futon. These should fit. Azathoth conjured them from somewhere, probab. Lee has a whole department store tucked away in this place. The clothes proved to be a simple training outfit, black pants and jacket similar to traditional martial arts gear but made from material that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. When Issei moved, the fabric rippled with subtle patterns that vanished when viewed directly. Void fabric, Kuroka explained, noting his interest. WAV. N from materials found in the dimensional gap. It'll resonate with your energy, make it easier to channel. Convenient. Issei fingered the material, which felt simultaneously substantial and ephemeral beneath his touch. Does Azazel just happen to have specialized clothing for every cosmic anomaly that crosses his path? Kuroka's laughter flowed like liquid silk. The Governor General has been preparing for various apocalyptic scenarios for millennia. You're probably one of his more interesting contingency plans. The casual reference to apocalypse should have disturbed Issei more than it did. Instead, he found himself wondering what other contingency plans Azazel maintained in this pocket dimension. Better not keep him waiting then, Issei said, rising to his feet. Kuroka made no move to leave as he picked up the clothes. She simply tilted her head, golden eyes gleaming with mischievous intent. Privacy, Issei prompted. Also overrated, she replied with a fanged smile. At his pointed look, she sighed dramatically. Fine, fine, I'll wait outside. But hurry, we have much to accomplish before the fractures worsen. Fractures, Issei called after her retreating form. Uchi had already slipped through the door with soundless efficiency. Alone, he changed quickly, finding the strange garments surprisingly comfortable. They moved with him as if anticipating his actions. The material conforming to his body without restricting movement. More importantly, they seemed to calm the constant pressure behind his eyes, the void energy that had been simmering just beneath consciousness since his awakening. Kuroka led him through the mansion's labyrinthine corridors without speaking, her movements efficient and purposeful, a notable shift from her usual languid demeanor. Something had changed since yesterday, some new urgency driving her actions. They emerged into a vast garden that defied conventional spatial understanding. Cherry trees in full bloom stood alongside autumn maples, winter bare oaks, and summer lush willows, 4 seasons coexisting in impossible harmony. The ground beneath shifted subtly between grass, sand, smooth stone, and something that led water but supported weight like solid ground. At the garden's center, Azazel waited. The fallen angel stood with his back to them, 12 jet black wings extended to their full impressive span. Before him hovered a 3-dimensional projection, a map of what Issei recognized as Kuo Town, but overlaid with pulsing lines of energy and several glowing red points. The pattern is accelerating, Azazel was saying to someone out of sight. 3 more appeared overnight. At this rate, we'll have full-scale breaches within days. The council demands an explanation, replied a female voice, crisp and precise with the faintest hint of an accent Issei couldn't place. Random dimensional anomalies don't simply manifest in concentrated patterns without cause. The cause stands behind me, Azazel replied without turning. Good morning, Issei. I trust you slept well. Issei stepped forward, Kuroka following like a shadow. Well enough. What are these fractures Kuroka mentioned? Now Azazel turned, his ancient eyes assessing Issei with calculated interest. Consequences of your awakening. The void energy you're manifesting is responding to your subconscious, creating weak points between dimensions. The person Azazel had been speaking with stepped into view, a young woman with silver white hair tied in a precise braid. She wore an elaborate outfit resembling a cross between business attire and battle armor, with Nordic runes inscribed along its borders. Intelligence sharpened her blue-gray eyes as she regarded Issei with open skepticism. This is the source, she asked, circling Issei with a scholar's analytical gaze. He appears entirely human. Appearances deceive, Rossweiss, Azazel replied. Issei, meet Lady Rossweiss, former Valkyrie, magical researcher, and currently my reluctant ally in preventing dimensional catastrophe. Former Valkyrie, Issei repeated, extending a hand that Rossweiss ignored in favor of producing a complex magical circle that she said over and around him like a scanning device. Fascinating, she murmured, all business. The energy signature resembles a sacred gear but inverted, projecting outward rather than containing power within. And these harmonic resonances, her brow furrowed as the magical circle flashed warning symbols. That can't be right. According to these readings, you're simultaneously here and elsewhere. Quantum superposition on a macro scale, Azazel supplied. One of many interesting features of our young friend's awakening abilities. Issei raised an eyebrow. You understand what's happening to me? Theoretically. Rossweiss replied, dismissing her magical circle with a precise gesture. Your energy signature suggests dimensional entanglement, a phenomenon previously observed only in certain dragon-class entities. Her clinical assessment softened slightly, though never in a pattern this complex or with void element dominance. The analytical approach was oddly comforting after YS of mystical pronouncements and cosmic warnings. Whatever else she might be, Rossweiss clearly approached supernatural phenomena with scientific rigor. Can you help me control it? Issei asked directly. Perhaps. Rossweiss straightened, professional demeanor firmly in place. I've spent centuries studying dimensional mathematics and energy transference equations. If your abilities operate according to consistent principles rather than chaotic manifestation, I could develop a theoretical framework for controlled application. She means yes, Kuroka interjected with a smirk, but wants to study you like a laboratory specimen first. Rossweiss's eyes narrowed at the Neko show. Some of us prefer methodical analysis to reckless experimentation, Cat. Some of us achieve results while others write theories nobody reads. Kuroka countered, tails bristling slightly. Enough, Azazel cut in, returning their attention to the hovering map. We have more pressing concerns than academic squabbles. These red points represent dimensional fractures currently forming throughout Kuo. Each one represents a weakening between our reality and others. Issei studied the map with growing concern. 7 red points pulsed across familiar locations: the shopping district, his school, the central park where he'd first encountered the Void Stalkers, even one discomfortingly close to his parents' home. These are happening because of me. Guilt colored his question. Indirectly, Rossweiss answered before Azazel could. Your awakening destabilized local dimensional boundaries. The effect should have dissipated naturally. But something, or someone, is deliberately exacerbating the fractures. The observers, Issei guessed, remembering the entity he'd banished. Azazel nodded grimly. They've taken interest in you. Which means they're taking interest in everything connected to you, including your hometown. Initial fractures are relatively harmless, Rossweiss continued, Manipu. Latting the projection to show a simulation of a red point expanding into a glowing tear. Small objects vanish, electromagnetic anomalies occur, occasionally non-sentient matter crosses over between dimensions. But left unchecked, Azazel added, they evolve into full breaches. The simulation advanced, showing the tear widening to disgorge shadowy entities resembling the Void Stalkers but more diverse in form and size. At which point we face a full-scale invasion from dimensions with very different physical laws and inhabitants than our own. Can they be closed? Issei asked, studying the simulation with growing dread. Kuroka snorted. Of course they can. That's why Miss Rune Scholar is here. She specializes in dimensional barriers. Theoretical dimensional mathematics, Rossweiss corrected stiffly. And yes, the fractures can be sealed, but conventional magical approaches are showing limited effectiveness. These aren't natural phenomena, they're responding to void energy specifically. All 3 supernatural beings turned to Issei expectantly. You want me to close them, he realized. Using the same power that's causing them. Fighting fire with fire, Azazel confirmed. Or in this case, void with void. Your abilities seem uniquely suited to manipulating these dimensional boundaries. Anxiety churned in Issei's stomach. I barely understand what I did against those Void Stalkers. How am I supposed to close dimensional fractures I can't even see? That's where our training begins, Azazel gestured expansively at the impossible garden surrounding them. This entire pocket dimension serves as a perfect practice environment, isolated from external influence but sensitive to void manipulation. Rossweiss stepped forward, her demeanor shifting subtly from researcher to instructor. Before attempting actual fracture closure, you need fundamental understanding of dimensional boundaries and void energy behavior. I've prepared a comprehensive 3-month CU curriculum covering relevant theoretical principles. We don't have 3 months, Kuroka interrupted, stepping closer to Issei. The fractures are multiplying daily. He needs practical experience, not theoretical lectures. Untrained application of void energy could exponentially worsen the situation, Rossweiss countered sharply. I have to agree with Rossweiss, Azazel interjected, surprising both women. Issei's power is too potent for trial and error approaches. We need structured development. Then we compromise, Issei stated, echoing his words from the previous day. Condensed tea. Hiyori with immediate practical application. Rossweiss teaches me the principles, Kuroka helps me apply them, and we test results in controlled settings before attempting anything in the real world. The three supernatural beings exchanged evaluating glances. That could work, Rossweiss acknowledged reluctantly. I could prioritize critical concepts over comprehensive understanding. As long as he gets hands-on practice. Kuroka added, not just magical equations and dusty theories. Azazel studied Issei with renewed interest. You continue to surprise me. Most humans, most beings of any kind, would be overwhelmed by these circumstances. Yet you're adapting, finding balanced solutions between opposing approaches. I'm just trying to keep up, Issei replied honestly. The truth was more complex. While consciously he felt perpetually off balance, something deeper within him approached these cosmic challenges with intuitive understanding that shouldn't have been possible for a 17-year-old former human. Then let's begin, Rossweiss declared, summoning multiple magical circles that expanded into floating screens filled with complex equations and diagrams. First prink. Iples of dimensional theory. Reality consists of vibrational frequencies rather than solid matter. Theory, Issei discovered, acquired new meaning when directly applicable to reality-altering abilities. Rossweiss's lectures on dimensional mathematics, delivered with machine-gun rapidity and clinical precision, would have been incomprehensible just days ago. Now, as void energy pulsed through his consciousness, the complex equations seemed almost self-evident, describing principles he somehow recognized intuitively. Dimensional boundaries function as semi-permeable membranes, Rossweiss explained. Silver hair gleaming in the pocket dimension's unusual light. Energy transfers occur constantly between adjacent realities, maintaining equilibrium across the multiverse. Like osmosis, Issei suggested. But with reality instead of water. Rossweiss paused mid-equation, surprise flickering across her features. That's an apt analogy, actually. The mathematical principles governing osmotic pressure share remarkable similarities with dimensional boundary theory. Kuroka, lounging nearby with feigned disinterest, rolled her eyes. Fascinating. Now perhaps we could move beyond elementary concepts to something actually useful. Understanding fundamentals is useful, Rossweiss retorted, irritation sharpening her accent. Unless you prefer he tear holes in reality through ignorance. I prefer he learn by doing, Kuroka replied, rising with predatory grace. Theory without application is just intellectual masturbation. Issei intervened before Rossweiss could respond to the deliberate provocation. Maybe we could try something practical that applies what I've learned so far. Rossweiss hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. There is a simple exercise used to teach novice mages dimensional awareness. She dismissed her complex equations with a gesture, replacing them with a simpler diagram. Essentially, you create a controlled microfracture, then immediately seal it, like pricking a bubble then healing it before it pops. Sounds reasonable, Issei agreed, relieved at the prospect of action after hours of theory. I'll monitor the energy patterns, Rossweiss continued, producing several talismans inscribed with Norse runes. These will contain any unexpected effects within a 3-meter radius. Kuroka positioned herself directly behind Issei, close enough that he felt her breath against his neck. Forget her toys. Focus on the feeling when you connected with the void before. That sensation of limitless potential, of boundaries becoming meaningless. Don't encourage chaotic manifestation, Rossweiss warned, completing a containment circle around them. Precision requires disciplined focus. Void energy responds to intuition, not rigid formulas, Kuroka countered. Her hands coming to rest lightly on Issei's shoulders. Caught between their contradictory approaches, Issei closed his eyes and sought his own path. The void within responded immediately, a cold, electric sensation spreading outward from his core. Rather than fighting its natural flow or forcing it into predetermined patterns, he simply observed its movement through his awareness. The dimensional barrier is strongest when frequencies align, he recalled from Rossweiss's lecture. And weakest during harmonic divergence. With that principle in mind, Issei visualized the space before him not as empty air but as a complex membrane vibrating at precise frequencies. He extended his awareness into that membrane, feeling its resilience and flexibility. Now introduce a controlled frequency shift, he murmured, repeating Rosweiss's instructions verbatim. The void energy responded, flowing through his consciousness into the dimensional boundary. Issei sensed rather than saw the microfracture forming, a tiny discordance in reality's harmonious vibration. The air before him shimmered, darkness pooling like liquid shadow in midair. Excellent control, Rosweiss observed, her analytical tone unable to completely mask her surprise. The fracture is forming precisely according to theoretical parameters. Don't lose focus, Kuroka urged quietly, her fingers tightening slightly on his shoulders. Feel the boundaries, don't just think about them. The microfracture stabilized, a perfect oval of absolute darkness hovering at eye level. Through it, Issei glimpsed something beyond normal perception. Geometric shapes in impossible configurations, moving with deliberate purpose through a medium that wasn't quite space as he understood it. Something's watching from the other side, he whispered, transfixed by alien awareness focusing suddenly in his direction. Close it now, Rosweiss ordered sharply. The containment field is registering external probing. Issei reached for the void energy again, intending to reverse the frequency shift and seal the microfracture. But before he could complete the process, something reached back, a tendril of consciousness that wasn't quite sentience as he understood it, mathematical in its precision yet fundamentally alien. Found you, it communicated, the concept slamming into Issei's mind with brutal directness. The microfracture pulsed, expanding beyond its intended parameters. Rosweiss's containment runes flared brilliant blue as they strained against sudden pressure from the other side. Kuroka hissed a warning, her own energy manifesting as purple-black flames around her hands. Close it, Azazel commanded from beyond the containment circle, light spears manifesting in his grasp. Panic threatened to overwhelm Issei as the controlled exercise spiraled into potential catastrophe. The fracture continued expanding, the alien presence pushing against dimensional boundaries with increasing force. Theoretical knowledge fragmented under pressure, complex equations dissolving into useless abstraction. Then, from the depths of his consciousness, Azathoth's dream voice resonated, "You are not the void. You are its master." Clarity returned. Issei stopped trying to apply Rosweiss's formulas or Kuroka's instinctual approaches. Instead, he simply reached out and gripped the edges of reality itself. No, he stated, a single word carrying absolute authority. The fracture froze mid-expansion, the alien presence recoiling from the command. Issei felt rather than saw the dimensional boundaries reasserting themselves, reality remembering its proper shape under his direction. With a gesture that felt as natural as breathing, he compressed the fracture until it collapsed back into nothingness. Dimensional frequencies realigning with audible harmony. Silence fell across the garden. Rosweiss's containment runes faded slowly, their purpose fulfilled. Kuroka's energy dissipated, though her hands remained on Issei's shoulders, steadying him as reaction set in, leaving him light-headed and trembling. That, Azazel said finally, dismissing his light spears, was not a standard microfracture exercise. Definitely not, Rosweiss agreed, already analyzing data from the event. Something actively responded to the dimensional opening, something that recognized Issei specifically. The question is what? Kuroka mused, her usual playfulness absent. And more importantly, how did it recognize him through such a small connection? Issei lowered himself to the ground, legs suddenly unsteady. It said, "Found you." Like it's been searching. The observers, Azazel theorized, pacing the containment circle's perimeter. They're actively monitoring dimensional boundaries for your energy signature. Which means the fractures appearing in Kuo are likely deliberate, Rosweiss concluded, her expression grave. Probes searching for similar void energy patterns. The implications struck Issei with sickening clarity. They're looking for me by creating dimensional weak points around locations connected to me. My school, my home. And endangering everything nearby in the process. Azazel confirmed grimly. These fractures will continue multiplying until they either find you or we close them permanently. I have to go back, Issei said, rising to his feet with renewed determination. If these things are happening because of me, I need to fix them. Absolutely not, Rosweiss objected immediately. You have minimal control over abilities that could potentially destroy reality itself. Returning to a populated area would be catastrophically irresponsible. For once, I agree with the Valkyrie, Kuroka added, surprising everyone. You're not ready for direct confrontation yet. Issei looked between them, frustration building. People I care about are in danger because of me. I can't hide in a pocket dimension while those fractures spread across my hometown. And what happens when you lose control in the middle of downtown Kuo? Rossweiss challenged. When void energy consumes a city block because you weren't prepared. We can. Risk exposure to the wider supernatural community either, Azazel added more gently. The moment devils or angels realize what you represent, you'll face threats far greater than dimensional fractures. Issei paced the containment circle, conflict evident in every movement. Part of him recognized the wisdom in their caution. The power stirring within him remained largely mysterious, responding to emotional states as much as conscious direction. But another part, perhaps the part connected to Azathoth, rebelled against hiding while others faced dangers meant for him. Then give me another option, he demanded. The authority in his voice making all three supernatural beings straighten unconsciously. Because I won't sit here doing theoretical exercises while my parents and friends are at risk. Silence fell as they considered alternatives. Finally, Rossweiss stepped forward, her practical nature asserting itself. I can create a stabilization matrix, she offered, already calculating possibilities. A network of Nordic runes combined with void-resonant materials to temporarily suppress your energy signature. It wouldn't block your abilities entirely, but it would mask them from long-range detection. A magical dampening field, Azazel considered, that could work for brief excursions, especially if we maintain strict time limits. I'll go with him, Kuroka volunteered, ignoring Rossweiss's immediate frown. I'm experienced in concealment techniques. If anything goes wrong, I can extract him before the situation escalates. It's still risky, Rossweiss objected. Quote, we have no baseline for predicting how dimensional entities might react to his presence. Which is precisely why practical testing is necessary, Azazel countered, warming to the idea. Controlled exposure under supervision provides data we can't gather any other way. Issei watched their debate with growing impatience. While they argued theoretical risks versus practical necessities, real fractures continued forming throughout his hometown. Finally, he interrupted with quiet certainty. I'm going, tonight, with whatever preparations you can provide by then. The only question is whether you're helping or hindering. The ultimatum hung in the air, challenging their authority. For a moment, Issei thought Rossweiss might refuse outright, her expression cycling through shock, outrage, and calculation before settling on reluctant acceptance. 8 hours, she conceded finally. I need at least that long to properly calibrate a suppression matrix to your specific energy pattern. Fine, Issei agreed, but no longer. Azazel studied him with unreadable ancient eyes. You understand what you're risking. Best case scenario, we close a few fractures before retreating. Worst case, I lose control and tear reality apart, Issei finished grimly. I know the stakes. Do you? Kuroka questioned, golden eyes suddenly serious. Because your personal worst case isn't reality tearing apart. It's being captured by entities that would use your power for purposes beyond your comprehension. Death would be merciful compared to what some dimensional predators do with captured prizes. The warning should have terrified him. Instead, it only strengthened his resolve. Then I'd better not get captured. Azazel's expression shifted subtly, something like pride mixing with concern. Very well. Rossweiss will prepare your suppression matrix. Kuroka and I will develop contingency plans for various scenarios. And you will continue training, Issei concluded, turning to Rossweiss. Starting with practical application of fracture closure techniques. The former Valkyrie nodded, professional demeanor reasserting itself. We'll focus on controlled energy projection and dimensional realignment. The theoretical principles remain the same whether closing artificial microfractures or larger natural breaches. As they returned to work with renewed purpose, Issei couldn't shake a growing certainty that events were accelerating beyond anyone's predictions. The fractures appearing across Kuo represented only the beginning, preliminary tremors before a cosmic quake that would reshape reality itself. And somehow, he stood at its epicenter. The full moon hung bloated and yellow over Kuo town, its light diffused through thin cloud cover that painted everything in sepia tones. From their vantage point atop the abandoned clock tower overlooking the shopping district, the city appeared deceptively normal, traffic flowing along main arteries, pedestrians hurrying along well-lit streets. Neon signs advertising everything from electronics to ramen. Only those with supernatural perception could see the wrongness spreading through reality's fabric, microscopic tears widening into visible fractures that distorted light and matter around them. The largest breach, pulsing with unhealthy green luminescence, had formed directly above the central shopping plaza. 7 active fractures detected, Rossweiss reported, scanning through multiple magical circles projecting real-time data. 3 dormant, 4 actively expanding. The central breach is approaching critical mass. Issei studied the dimensional tear with senses that extended beyond normal perception. The suppression matrix Rossweiss had created, an elaborate network of runic tattoos, covering his torso and arms beneath the void fabric clothing, dampened his power signature while allowing controlled application. It felt like trying to perform precision work while wearing thick gloves. But the trade-off seemed worthwhile if it prevented the observers from immediately detecting his presence. "Anything coming through yet?" he asked, focusing on the largest fracture. "Not yet," Kuroka replied, her golden eyes gleaming in the darkness as she prowled the clock tower's perimeter. "But the energy signature matches those void stalkers we encountered before. They're preparing to cross over." Azazel materialized from shadows nearby, his black wings temporarily hidden to avoid attracting attention. "Security perimeter is established. I've redirected mundane traffic away from the A-ray and placed concealment wards around the primary breach. We have approximately 30 minutes before devils from the local territory notice something amiss." "Devils?" Issei questioned, momentarily distracted. "Kuo town falls under Grimoire jurisdiction," Azazel explained briefly. "They maintain a surveillance network for supernatural disturbances. Our activities will eventually trigger their alerts, regardless of my countermeasures. Then we work quickly," Rossweiss concluded, dismissing her scanning arrays with a precise gesture. "Issei, are you prepared for initial contact?" Despite hours of intensive training, uncertainty churned beneath Issei's outward calm. Controlled exercises in Azazel's pocket dimension differed fundamentally from addressing an active dimensional breach in the real world, with real consequences for failure. "As ready as I'll get without more time," he replied honestly. "What's the approach?" "Direct intervention," Rossweiss outlined, "all business. Quote, I'll establish a containment perimeter to prevent collateral effects. You'll make contact with the breach using void manipulation techniques we practiced. Kuroka will maintain sensory vigilance for incoming entities. Azazel provides emergency extraction if needed. And if I lose control, the question needed asking, however uncomfortable, I'll knock you unconscious immediately," Kuroka stated matter-of-factly. "Senjutsu strike to your spiritual core. You'll wake with the worst headache of your life, but reality remains intact." The casual way she described potentially fatal intervention should have been disturbing. Instead, Issei found it reassuring. Whatever else Kuroka might be, she wouldn't hesitate to do what was necessary if things went sideways. "Let's go," he decided, pushing aside lingering doubts. They descended from the clock tower in practiced formation, Azazel securing their advance, Rossweiss and Issei in the center, Kuroka covering their rear. The empty shopping plaza stretched before them. Storefronts darkened after business hours. Directly above the central fountain, reality rippled like heat distortion, colors inverting along the fracture's jagged edges. Rossweiss immediately began establishing a containment perimeter, Nordic runes materializing in precise geometric patterns across the plaza. Each symbol locked into place with mathematical precision, eating a complex array designed to isolate dimensional effects within its boundaries. "Remember," she instructed as she worked, "dimensional fractures respond to harmonic resonance. Your void energy must align with the breach's specific frequency before attempting closure." "I remember," Issei assured her, studying the fracture with extended senses. Unlike the controlled microfractures from training, this breach radiated malevolent purpose, not random damage but deliberate incursion. Something on the other side was methodically weakening dimensional boundaries, creating a passage designed specifically for cross-reality travel. Kuroka positioned herself at Issei's right shoulder, her usual playfulness replaced by predatory focus. "Multiple entities gathering on the other side," she reported quietly. "Similar energy signatures to the void stalkers, but different. More organized. Hurry with those preparations, Azazel urged Rossweiss. We're running out of time. The former Val. Kyrie completed her containment array with a final complex symbol that locked the entire structure into place. Dimensional isolation active. Proceed with the closure attempt. Taking a deep breath, Issei centered himself and reached for the void energy simmering beneath his consciousness. The suppression matrix made access more difficult, like trying to drink through multiple layers of fabric, but the power responded nevertheless. Flowing through pathways established during training. Following Rossweiss's theoretical framework, he extended his awareness toward the fracture, sensing its vibrational frequency. As predicted, the dimensional tier oscillated in complex patterns, its edges pulsing with algorithmic precision rather than chaotic energy. It's artificial, Issei realized aloud. Someone designed this breach specifically. That complicates matters, Rossweiss acknowledged, monitoring the containment field. Deliberately crafted fractures often contain security measures against external closure. Can you still seal it? Azazel questioned, light spears materializing in his hands as the fracture's pulsing intensified. Instead of answering directly, Issei extended his consciousness further. Probing the breach's structure, beyond the visible tear, he sensed mathematical equations of impossible complexity, a dimensional lockpicking tool methodically disassembling reality's barriers. I need to match the pattern, he murmured, more to himself than his companions. Introduce counter-harmonics along the primary oscillation points. The void responded to his understanding, energy flowing through his extended awareness into the fracture itself. Issei visualized the counter-frequencies Rossweiss had described in training, applying them to specific points along the breach's perimeter. For a moment, it seemed to work. The fracture's edges stabilized, its expansion halting as dimensional harmonies realigned under his influence. Then, without warning, the tear pulsed with renewed intensity. Geometric patterns rearranging to counter his intervention. It's adaptive, Issei warned, adjusting his approach as the breach actively resisted closure. Whatever create, this fracture anticipated interference. That's impossible, Rossweiss objected, her magical monitors displaying cascading warning symbols. Dimensional mathematics can't include adaptive algorithms without sentient guidance. Well, something's definitely guiding it, Kuroka hissed, dropping into a combat stance as the breach flared brilliant green. And they're coming through now. The fracture split wider, darkness spilling through like liquid shadow. From within that darkness emerged 5 figures, humanoid in basic configuration but wrong in fundamental ways. Unlike the insectal void stalkers, these entities moved with fluid grace, their forms composed of overlapping geometric shapes that shifted and realigned with each motion. Where faces should have been, they displayed only smooth reflective surfaces that mirrored distorted versions of their surroundings. Void architects, Azazel identified grimly. High-order dimensional engineers, far more dangerous than stalkers. He lead entity turned its mirror face toward their group, surfaces rippling as it processed their presence. When it spoke, the voice emerged not from the figure itself but from the air around them, vibrating through reality rather than mere atmosphere. Anomalous energy pattern detected. Containment protocols initiated. The 5 entities moved in perfect synchronization, spreading to form a pentagonal formation around the breach. Their limbs extended impossibly, fingers elongating into crystalline appendages that anchored directly into the fabric of reality. They're stabilizing the fracture, Rossweiss realized. Analyzing their movements, creating a permanent passage. That cannot happen, Azazel stated flatly, 12 black wings unfurling from his back as he abandoned pretense of concealment. Issei, close the breach. Kuroka and I will handle the architects. Interference detected, the entities announced in unified voice. Eliminating obstacles. The mirror-faced beings gestured in precise formation. Reality rippled around their crystalline fingers as they rewrote local dimensional laws with mathematical precision. The concrete beneath Azazel liquefied instantly, the air around Kuroka solidified into crystal, trapping her mid-movement. Rossweiss countered with rapid-fire Norse incantations, protective runes flaring to counteract reality distortion within her containment field. Their dimensional manipulation exceeds expected parameters. They're rewriting local physics. Issei watched in horror as Azazel sank waist-deep into suddenly fluid concrete or stabilizing himself with light spears. Kuroka struggled against crystallized air, her senjutsu flaring as she methodically shattered her impromptu prison. Target acquired, the architects announced. All 5 mirror faces turning toward Issei simultaneously. Primordial pattern identified. Extraction authorized. Understanding flashed through Issei with sickening clarity. They weren't simply creating a passage for invasion. They were hunting him specifically, the fracture serving as both detection system and extraction point. The lead architect extended its crystalline fingers toward him, reality warping along their path. Subject will surrender for analysis. Something within Issei rebelled against their presumption, a fundamental rejection of external control that transcended conscious thought. The void energy surged against Rosweiss's suppression matrix, pressing against runic constraints with increasing force. I don't think so, Issei replied, voice layered with harmonics. That made Rosweiss's containment runes vibrate in sympathetic resonance. Instead of fighting the fracture directly, Issei changed tactics, focusing on the architects themselves. Their mathematical precision suggested fundamental rules governing their manifestation in this reality. If they could rewrite local physics, perhaps those same principles could be turned against them. Extending his awareness, Issei perceived the equations underlying the architect's physical forms, complex algorithms maintaining their coherence across dimensional boundaries. With instinctive understanding that would have astonished Rosweiss, he identified the primary variables governing their existence in Earth's reality. Then he simply changed the parameters. Return to your own dimension, he commanded. Void energy flowing through his consciousness into the mathematical foundations of reality itself. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The architect's mirror faces shattered, reflective surfaces racking along geometric patterns as their forms began destabilizing. Their perfect synchronization faltered as each entity struggled independently against the fundamental rewriting of their dimensional anchoring. Unauthorized reality modification, they protested in discordant voices. Countermeasures deploying. But Issei had already pushed further, identifying the fracture's mathematical underpinnings and recognizing its connection to the architects themselves. They weren't merely using the breach, they were structurally integrated with it, their dimensional existence dependent on its continued stability. With that understanding, solution became obvious. Rather than closing the fracture directly, Issei gripped the equations binding the architects to their creation and severed them with surgical precision. The effect cascaded through both entities and breached simultaneously, the architect's forms dissolving into component geometries while the fracture began collapsing without their sustaining influence. Get back, Rosweiss shouted, recognizing what was happening. Dimensional rebound imminent. Azazel freed himself from the semi-solid concrete with a powerful surge of his wings. Grabbing Kuroka as he launched skyward, Rosweiss reinforced her containment field with desperate intensity, Norse runes flaring brilliant blue as they strained against impending dimensional backlash. At the fracture's center, the 5 architects imploded simultaneously, their complex forms compressing into points of absolute darkness before vanishing entirely. The breach itself pulsed once, reality rippling outward from its boundaries like stone dropped in still water. Then it collapsed with catastrophic force. The dimensional backlash struck like a physical blow, slamming into Rosweiss's containment field with enough force to shatter half her runic array instantly. The remaining barriers held just long enough for Azazel to throw a secondary shield around their group before they too disintegrated. When the chaos subsided, the shopping plaza had been transformed. A perfect circular depression 30 feet across and 5 feet deep marked where the fracture had collapsed, its edges glass smooth as if reality itself had melted and reformed. Nothing remained of the void architects save 5 geometric burn patterns etched into the transformed surface. Well, Kuroka remarked into the stunned silence, brushing crystalline fragments from her clothing. That was certainly effective, if somewhat lacking in subtlety. Rosweiss stared at Issei with scientific fascination warring against instinctive caution. You didn't just close the fracture, you rewrote the dimensional equations governing the architect's manifestation. That's theoretically impossible without centuries of study. I just saw the patterns, Issei explained inadequately, the void energy settling back beneath consciousness as reaction set in. They were using mathematics to maintain their forms, so I changed the variables. You did considerably more than that, Azazel observed, landing beside the transformed plaza section. You severed their connection to whoever sent them. That's why the breach collapsed so violently. The controlling intelligence lost its anchor point. The implications registered slowly through Issei's adrenaline-fogged mind. Someone's coordinating these incursions. The fractures, the stalkers, the architects, they're all working under central direction. The observers, Kuroka suggested, circling the depression with predatory caution. Dimensional entities rarely cooperate unless compelled by greater power. Regardless of who's responsible, Rossweiss interjected pragmatically, we have 6 more fractures to address before devils arrive to investigate this disturbance. She gestured to the transformed plaza. And this level of destruction is unacceptable for subsequent interventions. Issei nodded, understanding her concern. The suppression matrix had partially failed during the confrontation, allowing void energy to flow more directly than intended. Future breaches would require more controlled approaches. I can refine the technique, he assured her. Now that I understand the fundamental structure, I can close fractures without triggering dimensional rebound. You'll need to, Azazel agreed grimly, checking a device resembling a pocket watch. We have less than 15 minutes before Grimoire representatives arrive. The energy discharge from that collapse was impossible to conceal. The school next, Issei decided, already oriente. D toward the fracture he could sense pulsing near Kuo Academy. That one's growing faster than the others. As they prepared to move, Issei cast a final glance at the transformed plaza section. The dimensional mathematics he'd perceived during the confrontation lingered in his memory with perfect clarity, complex equations that should have been incomprehensible yet made intuitive sense to something awakening within him. For the first time since discovering his inhuman nature, Issei felt not fear but genuine curiosity about the cosmic power he contained. If he could rewrite dimensional laws instinctively, what other abilities might emerge as the Abyssal egg continued awakening? And more concerning, who or what was coordinating these increasingly sophisticated attempts to capture him? The fracture at Kuo Academy hovered directly above the old school building, its edges less defined than the shopping district breach but pulsing with similar algorithmic precision. No void architects had yet emerged, though Kuroka's enhanced senses detected movement on the other side. Different entities this time, she reported, golden eyes narrowed in concentration. Smaller signatures, greater numbers. They're waiting for something. Rossweiss established a modified containment field, adjusting runic parameters based on their previous encounter. The fracture pattern suggests this breach was created after the shopping district incident. It's evolving in response to our countermeasures. Learning from failure, Azazel translated, maintaining a vigilant perimeter. Whoever's coordinating these incursions is gathering data from each attempt. Issei studied the fracture with extended senses, identifying crucial differences from the previous breach. This one contained mathematical safeguards, equations designed specifically to prevent the approach he'd used successfully before. They're adapting to me personally, he realized with growing unease. This fracture has countermeasures against void energy manipulation. That's impossible, Rossweiss objected automatically, then frowned at her own analytical readings. Unless they recovered data from the destroyed architects. Information transmission across dimensional barriers, Azazel mused. Sophisticated coordination indeed. Kuroka hissed a warning, her form blurring momentarily as she shifted position. Something's coming through. Multiple contacts. The fracture pulsed, darkness spilling outward as reality parted along predetermined lines. Unlike the shopping district breach, this intrusion occurred with mathematical precision. No violent disruption, just the clinical separation of dimensional barriers according to calculated parameters. From within the darkness emerged not void architects but a swarm of smaller entities, each approximately the size of a large insect, their bodies composed of interlocking geometric shapes that reconfigured with each movement. They poured through the breach in organized formations, immediately spreading across the school grounds in search patterns. Dimensional mites, Azazel identified, light spears materializing in his hands. Scout entities that locate and tag targets for extraction. They're searching for my energy signature, Issei guessed, watching the systematic way they moved across the school grounds. Precisely, Rossweiss confirmed, monitoring their movements through magical arrays. And since your suppression matrix is still partially compromised from the previous encounter, They'll find me immediately, Issei concluded grimly. As if triggered by his realization, every mite in the vicinity froze simultaneously, their geometric forms reorienting toward his position with perfect synchronization. Then they swarmed. Thousands of component entities flowing together into a living wave that surged across the school grounds with singular purpose. I'll handle the swarm, Kuroka announced, stepping forward with dark energy swirling around her hands. Focus on closing the breach before reinforcements arrive. Without waiting for acknowledgement, she unleashed concentrated senjutsu in sweeping arcs that scythed through the approaching mites. Where her energy touched, the geometric entities fragmented into component shapes before dissolving entirely. But for every dozen she destroyed, hundreds more poured through the fracture in endless supply. The breach first, Azazel agreed, joining Kuroka in defensive formation. We can't match their numbers indefinitely. Rossweiss reinforced the containment perimeter with additional runic arrays. I've modified the field to allow controlled void manipulation while suppressing dimensional feedback. It should prevent another rebound effect. Issei nodded, already focusing on the fracture's mathematical structure. As expected, its fundamental equations contained specific countermeasures against the approach he'd used at the shopping district, variables designed to destabilize if manipulated directly. They're learning too quickly, he observed, probing for alternative weaknesses. This fracture has fail-safes against direct closure. Then don't close it directly, Rossweiss suggested. Deflecting stray mites with precise magical constructs. Dimensional breaches follow conservation principles. Energy transferred must balance across boundaries. The insight triggered immediate understanding. Instead of attacking the fracture itself, Issei could manipulate the energy exchange, maintaining its stability. Like damming a river rather than trying to dry the riverbed directly. Reaching into the void, he extended his awareness into the dimensional currents flowing through the breach. As Rossweiss had explained during training, reality maintained equilibrium through constant energy transfer between adjacent dimensions. By introducing controlled void energy into that exchange, he could disrupt the balance without triggering the fracture's defensive algorithms. I need 30 seconds of clear focus, he informed his companions, void energy gathering beneath his consciousness. You'll have it, Azazel promised grimly, unleashing a barrage of GHT spears that carved burning paths through the swarm's main concentration. Kuroka materialized directly beside Issei, her back to his as she established a defensive perimeter of swirling senjutsu. Just hurry. More are coming through with each passing second. Centered between his defenders, Issei closed his eyes and fully embraced the void within. The suppression matrix strained against sudden power influx. Runic tattoos heating against his skin as they struggled to maintain control. Rather than fighting the constraints, he worked within them, channeling void energy in precise measures rather than overwhelming surges. Following the theoretical principles Rossweiss had drilled into him, Issei introduced controlled energy imbalance into the fracture's maintenance equation. Like adding weight to one side of a perfectly balanced scale, the dimensional equilibrium began shifting incrementally. The fracture responded immediately, compensatory algorithms attempting to rebalance energy distribution across its boundaries. But each adjustment created new imbalances as Issei systematically disrupted the underlying mathematical foundation without directly attacking its protected parameters. It's working, Rossweiss observed through her monitoring arrays. The breach is destabilizing from within rather than collapsing from external pressure. Around them, the dimensional mites ray CTED to the fracture's instability with increasing frenzy. Their systematic search patterns dissolved into chaotic movement as they received conflicting directives from beyond the breach. Some continue, pursuing Issei while others return to the fracture, attempting to restore proper energy distribution through their own dimensional manipulation. Almost there, Issei murmured, feeling the Briach's mathematical integrity approaching critical failure points. With surgical precision, he introduced a final calculated imbalance, not enough to trigger catastrophic collapse, but sufficient to disrupt the fracture's self-sustaining equations. The breach pulsed once, its edges blurring as dimensional boundaries reasserted natural configuration. Get back, Rossweiss commanded, reinforcing the containment field as energy patterns shifted toward controlled dissipation. Unlike the shopping district's violent implosion, this fracture closed with mathematical precision. Dimensional boundaries are Aligning according to natural principles as artificial manipulation ceased. The remaining mites dissolved instantly, their existence dependent on the breach's sustained connection. When the process completed, the school grounds remained untouched. No physical evidence of the dimensional incursion save a faint shimmer in the air that faded within seconds. Much better, Rossweiss approved, Profe. Chanel's satisfaction evident in her tone. Controlled closure without collateral effects. And more importantly, Azazel added, scanning their surroundings with ancient senses, minimal energy discharge to attract attention. Kuroka relaxed her defensive posture marginally, though her golden eyes remained alert for potential threats. 5 fractures remaining, and our time advantage is nearly exhausted. The fracture near my home next, Issei decided, concerned for his parents' overriding tactical considerations. It's smaller than the others but growing quickly. As they prepared to move, a subtle shift in atmospheric pressure made all 4 freeze simultaneously. Azazel's expression darkened as he turned toward the school's main building, where crimson light suddenly bloomed behind every window. Too late, he muttered. The Grimoire heir has arrived. A transportation circle manifested 30 feet away, inscribed with the elaborate crest of House Grimoire. From within its crimson glow emerged 4 figures, a red-haired young woman leading 3 companions with expressions ranging from cautious to openly hostile. Governor General Azazel, the redhead greeted with formal politeness belied by suspicion in her turquoise eyes. This is unexpected. I don't recall authorizing dimensional experiments in my territory. Lady Rias, Azazel returned smoothly. A pleasure as always. This isn't an experiment but rather emergency containment of dimensional anomalies manifesting throughout Kuo. The blond young man at Rias's right stepped forward aggressively, a sword materializing in his hand. Bullshit. We detected void energy manipulation. Classification unknown. Power levels exceeding authorized parameters for this territory. Stand down, Kiba, Rias commanded without looking at him. Her attention fixed on Issei. I'm more interested in why the Governor General has brought an unknown entity into Devil territory without formal notification. Issei met her analytical gaze directly, sensing power beneath her controlled exterior, not overwhelming by cosmic standards, but formidable within human parameters. More concerning was her obvious intelligence, calculating EY's missed nothing as she assessed their group's composition. This is precisely why notification was delayed, Azazel responded diplomatically. The situation remains under evaluation. Once properly classified, appropriate documentation will be filed with all territorial authorities. The smallest member of Rias's group, a white-haired girl with expressionless golden eyes, pointed directly at Issei. Void signature. Unclassified. Dangerous. Kaneko, Rias acknowledged with a slight nod. Perhaps introductions are in order, Governor. Before Azazel could formulate a suitably vague response, Kuroka stepped forward with deliberate provocation. My, little Sharon has grown. Still serving devil masters like a trained pet. The white-haired girl, Kaneko, tensed visibly, hatred flashing across her previously emotionless features. Murderer. Stray devil Kuroka, Rias identified, crimson energy gathering around her hands. Your presence alone justifies immediate intervention under territorial accords. The confrontation balanced on knife's edge. Devils prepared for combat. Azazel caught between diplomatic necessity and tactical priorities, Kuroka deliberately antagonizing her apparent sister. Only Rossweiss maintained professional detachment, monitoring the remaining fractures through discrete magical circles. We don't have time for this, Issei stated, voice carrying expected authority that momentarily stilled both groups. 5-dimensional breaches remain active. Unless addressed immediately, they'll continue expanding until catastrophic failure occurs. Rias shifted her attention fully to him, reassessing with obvious interest. And you are someone trying to prevent dimensional incursion, he replied simply. The specifics can wait until existential threats are contained. He's right, Rossweiss interjected, displaying monitoring data through an expanded magical circle. This fracture near the residential district is approaching critical instability. Projected collapse within 17 minutes. After a calculated pause, Rias dismissed her gathered power with a gesture. Very well. House Grimoire takes territorial security seriously. We'll east with containment while reserving judgment on unauthorized activities. Reasonable compromise, Azazel agreed smoothly, ancient eyes betraying relief at avoided conflict. We've already neutralized Ed2 fractures using controlled void manipulation. 5 remain at varying stages of development. The residential district first, Issei insisted, already oriented toward the fracture threatening his family home. My team will handle the breach near the train station, Rias countered, clearly establishing independent authority rather than subordination to Azathoth's group. Akano, Kiba, you're with me. Kaneko, observe the governor's group and maintain communication links. The white-haired girl nodded once, deliberately positioning herself where she could watch both Issei and Kuroka simultaneously. Her expressionless demeanor had returned, though tension remained evident in her rigid posture. How delightful, Kuroka purred, stretching with deliberate provocation. Family reunion under apocalyptic circumstances. Just like old times, Sharon. My name is Kaneko, the smaller girl responded flatly. And you are not family. Issei intervened before Kuroka could escalate further. Save the reunion for after we've prevented dimensional collapse. The residential fracture is growing more quickly than the others. Without waiting for response, he headed toward his parents' neighborhood. Azazel and Rosweiss falling into practiced formation around him. After brief hesitation, Kuroka followed, deliberately brushing against Kaneko as she passed. The white-haired devil maintained a motionless expression as she joined their group, but Issei sensed the barely contained fury beneath her controlled exterior. Whatever history existed between the two feline yokai clearly involved deep wounds that time had failed to heal. Just one more complication in an already catastrophically complex situation. The fracture near Issei's family home differed fundamentally from the previous breaches. Where the shopping district and school fractures had displayed calculated precision, mathematical incursions designed for specific purposes, this tear radiated chaotic instability, its edges fluctuating wildly as dimensional boundaries weakened without coordinated direction. This isn't like the others, Issei observed as they established position in the neighborhood park 3 blocks from his parents' house. It's degrading naturally rather than expanding systematically. Rosweiss analyzed the breach through multiple magical arrays, her expression growing increasingly concerned. It's a secondary effect rather than primary incursion, dimensional tissue weakened by proximity to active fractures. Like an aneurysm in reality's fabric, Azazel translated grimly. Potentially more dangerous than deliberate breaches because it lacks stabilizing parameters. The fracture pulsed erratically, colors inverting along its boundaries as space itself warped in nauseous configurations. Unlike previous breaches, no entities emerged, but occasional objects from the surrounding area vanished when passing too near its fluctuating edges. If this ruptures completely, Rosweiss warned, the dimensional backlash could affect everything within a half-kilometer radius. Including your family residence, she added, with uncharacteristic gentleness toward Issei. Then we close it immediately, he decided, already reaching for the void within. Careful, Azazel cautioned. Natural fractures respond unpredictably to direct manipulation. They lack the mathematical framework of engineered breaches. Kaneko positioned herself at the perimeter, golden eyes shifting between the fracture and their group with unwavering vigilance. Devil reinforcements approaching. 3 minutes. We don't have 3 minutes. Kuroka countered, her usual playfulness absent as she studied the deteriorating breach. This thing's going critical faster than predicted. Rosweiss established a modified containment field, adjusting runic parameters for natural rather than artificial fracture dynamics. The suppression matrix is still compromised from previous engagements. Full void manipulation could trigger premature collapse. Then we work with what we have, Issei stated, assessing options with rapidly evolving understanding. The previous fractures had responded to mathematical approaches, countering precise equations with equally precise void manipulation. This breach required fundamentally different tactics, not counterbalancing artificial constructs but reinforcing natural dimensional boundaries against chaotic degradation. Drawing on Rosweiss's theoretical frameworks and Kuroka's intuitive approaches, Issei extended his awareness into the fracture's destabilizing edges. Rather than introducing counter-frequencies or energy imbalances, he focused on reinforcing the dimensional tissue itself, like suturing a wound rather than countering an infection. I need your help, he said to Rosweiss. The containment field needs to mirror natural dimensional frequency exactly, like a splint supporting broken bone while it heals. The former Valkyrie immediately grasped his intent, modifying her runic arrays with mathematical precision, adjusting harmonic resonance to match dimensional baseline, containment transitioning to supportive configuration. As the runic field shifted from isolation to reinforcement, Issei channeled void energy in careful measures through the compromised suppression matrix. Instead of direct manipulation, he utilized the void's fundamental property as dimensional foundation, the primordial substance from which reality itself had emerged. "It's working," Kuroka observed, her spiritual senses extended to monitor energy flows. The fractures stabilizing along its primary axis. Indeed, the chaotic fluctuations were gradually subsiding as Issei's carefully controlled void energy reinforced weakened dimensional boundaries. Like scaffolding supporting a collapsing structure, the energy provided fundamental stability while reality's natural resilience reasserted itself. Maintaining harmonic alignment, Rossweiss reported, adjusting runic parameters with precise gestures. Dimensional integrity increasing to 70% of baseline. For several tense minutes, they worked in synchronized effort, Issei providing controlled void energy, Rossweiss maintaining precise harmonic resonance through runic frameworks, Kuroka monitoring spiritual feedback patterns, Azazel securing their perimeter against potential interruption. And even Kaneko contributing by extending her own senjutsu senses to detect fluctuations imperceptible to conventional monitoring. Gradually, the fracture stabilized completely, its chaotic edges realigning with natural dimensional boundaries as void energy reinforced reality's fundamental structure. Unlike the previous breaches, this one closed through healing rather than forced collapse. Dimensional tissue regenerating with minimal disruption. When the process completed, the park remained entirely unchanged, no physical evidence of the catastrophe they'd averted. Impressive cooperation, Azazel commented. Genuine appreciation in his ancient eyes, particularly given the complicated dynamics involved. Kaneko maintained expressionless exterior, though her rigid posture relaxed marginally. Devils approaching. 20 seconds. Perfect timing, Kuroka remarked, stretching with deliberate languor. Let them handle the remaining fractures while we withdraw to more interesting activities. That's not happening, Issei countered immediately. I'm seeing this through to completion. Rossweiss assessed him with professional concern. The suppression matrix has degraded to minimal functionality. Continued void manipulation risks complete failure and unrestricted energy discharge. Then we adapt, he insisted. Modify the matrix, create alternative containment approaches, whatever it takes. Those fractures exist because of me, I'm not leaving until all are closed. Before further objections could materialize, crimson light flared nearby as a Grimoire transportation circle manifested. Rias emerged with her two companions, satisfaction evident in her composed demeanor. Breach near the train station successfully contained, she reported, addressing Azazel directly while studiously ignoring Kuroka. Though your void manipulation technique would have been more efficient than conventional devil approaches. How unfortunate you lack such capabilities. Kuroka commented with deliberate provocation, earning a warning glare from Azazel. Rias maintained perfect composure, turning her attention to Issei instead. Your method appears effective as well. Perhaps combining approaches would optimize efficiency for the remaining fractures. The diplomatic overture carried obvious subtext, curiosity about Issei's abilities coupled with desire for strategic information. Calculated cooperation to serve multiple agendas simultaneously. 3 fractures remain active, Rossweiss reported before Issei could respond, displaying their locations through a projected map. 2 minor breaches showing minimal expansion and 1 major fracture in the forest preserve demonstrating advanced development. The forest breach is primary, Azazel assessed immediately. The others are likely aftereffects, similar to what we just contained. Agreed, Rias nodded. We'll divide resources accordingly. My queen and knight will address the minor breaches while we concentrate on the primary incursion. The efficiency of her strategic assessment impressed Issei despite growing wariness about devil involvement. Whatever political complications might arise from their participation, Rias Grimoire clearly prioritized territorial security over factional advantage, at least for immediate crisis management. The suppression matrix requires modification before further engagement. Rossweiss informed Issei, already calculating adjustments. I need 10 minutes to recalibrate runic parameters for continued void manipulation. We don't have, he began, before Azazel interrupted with raised hand. Actually, this works to our advantage. Lady Grimory's team can address minor breaches while we prepare for the primary incursion. Tactical necessity aligning with practical requirements. Rias studied them with sharp intelligence, clearly recognizing unstated complications but choosing pragmatism over immediate inquiry. Very well. Akino, Kiba, contain the minor fractures using conventional barriers. Minimal energy discharge, maximum efficiency. Kaneko remains with the governor's team for observation and coordination. Her subordinates acknowledged with respectful nods before departing toward their assigned targets. Kaneko maintained her position, golden eyes watching Kuroka with unveiled suspicion. 10 minutes, Rossweiss repeated to Issei, producing additional runic implements from dimensional storage. The matrix requires complete reconfiguration for sustained operation. I'll help, Kuroka offered unexpectedly, ignoring Kaneko's immediate tension. Senjutsu principles can reinforce void containment through spiritual harmonization. Rossweiss hesitated briefly before nodding. Acceptable. Your spiritual sensitivity may identify resonant CE patterns conventional monitoring would miss. As they began modifying the suppression matrix, Issei found himself under Rias Grimory's direct assessment, her turquoise eyes studying him with calculated interest beyond immediate crisis management. You're not what I expected, she commented finally. What did you expect? Issei countered, meeting her gaze directly. Based on energy signatures, something less human. Her expression remained composed, but genuine curiosity animated her features. Void manipulation typically requires either specialized sacred gear or direct dragon lineage. You appear to possess neither. Appearances deceive, Issei replied, deliberately echoing Azazel's earlier statement. A slight smile curved Rias's lips. Indeed they do, which raises fascinating questions about why the Governor-General himself oversees your activities personally. Questions better addressed after dimensional stability is restored, Azazel interjected smoothly, rejoining their conversation. Strategic priorities and all that. Of course, Rias agreed with perfect political poise. Though I must insist on comprehensive briefing once immediate threats are neutralized. Rhetorical sovereignty requires informed oversight. The diplomatic exchange continued with precisely calibrated politeness overlaying obvious power dynamics. Rias establishing territorial authority Heil acknowledging Azazel's greater experience, Azazel deferring superficially while maintaining operational control, both circling the central question of Issei's nature and abilities with careful indirection. Observing their interaction provided unexpected insight into supernatural politics, a complex dance of authority, information, and calculated cooperation that transcended simple adversarial relationships. Whatever historical tensions existed between devils and fallen angels, practical necessity created functional alliances when existential threats emerged. Modification complete, Rossweiss announced finally, interrupting the diplomatic fencing match. The suppression matrix should maintain stability through one additional major engagement before requiring complete replacement. Just in time, Kuroka added, her golden eyes fixed on the distant forest. The primary fracture is accelerating toward critical threshold. Issei felt it too, a pulsing wrongness that resonated through dimensional barriers. Emanating from the forest preserve at Kuo's northern boundary. Unlike the previous breaches, this fracture radiated purposeful malevolence, not random degradation or clinical precision but active hostility directed specifically outward. Something's waiting on the other side, he said quietly. Something that's been monitoring our activities through the other fractures. Then we shouldn't disappoint our audience, Azazel replied grimly, 12 black wings unfurling from his back as he abandoned diplomatic pretense. Lady Grimory, I suggest you recall your team immediately. What awaits us likely exceeds conventional devil countermeasures. To her credit, Rias assessed the situation without ego or territorial posturing. Agreed. I'll establish communication else with my brother's forces as contingency. She produced an elaborate communication circle, issuing rapid instructions to her absent team members. Rossweiss completed final adjustments to Issei's suppression matrix, the runic tattoos reconfigured for maximum stability during high-energy manipulation. This will hold through one major engagement. Beyond that, Complete suppression failure becomes inevitable. Then we make it count. Issei decided, the void stirring beneath consciousness as they prepared for confrontation. Whatever awaited them in the forest, one certainty remained, the dime. Encional fractures represented only the beginning of something vastly larger than local territorial disputes or supernatural politics. The boundaries between realities were weakening systematically, Issei stood at the epicenter of cosmic forces beyond conventional comprehension. As they moved toward the final confrontation, Kaneko fell into step beside him, golden eyes assessing with unexpected insight. "You're the reason," she stated, not a question but absolute certainty. "The fractures, the void energy, everything." Issei met her gaze directly. "Yes, why? I'm still figuring that out," he answered honestly. Kaneko nodded once, accepting his response without further inquiry. "Be careful with my sister," she added after several silent steps. "She uses people." Before Issei could respond to the unexpected warning, they arrived at the forest's edge, where reality itself shuddered against impending invasion from beyond dimensional boundaries. Chapter 2 End. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.